I look out the window at the park where maple leaves are slowly swirling in the air. 77 years. 77 years I, Ebenezer Hollister, have watched the seasons change, my daughter grow up, my dreams crumble, and hard-earned money become the only thing that truly matters in this world. I have always been a calculating person. My profession as a tax consultant taught me one simple truth: numbers don't lie, and people do all the time. In my 35 years in the tax field, I have seen more financial schemes than anyone else will see in a few lifetimes. I learned to see the true motives behind smiles and friendly handshakes. My wife Eleanor died 11 years ago. Cancer took her quickly, leaving me alone with our only daughter Cordelia. Or rather, not really alone. By then, she'd been married for 7 years to Trent Pearson, a mid-level manager at an insurance company with ambitions far beyond his abilities. Cordelia had always been a difficult child. As a child, I was often too strict with her, demanding excellent grades, perfect behavior, complete conformity to my ideas of what the daughter of a successful man should be. Eleanor said I was overreaching, but I believed I was preparing my daughter for the harsh realities of the world. Now, looking back, I realize I may have pushed her too hard. Our relationship with Cordelia had never been warm, but after Eleanor's death, it had become quite chilly. Calls once a month, the obligatory and strained visits on holidays, that's all that connected us for the last few years. She'd come with Trent. They'd sit for exactly as long as propriety demanded, and then they'd leave with visible relief. When I turned 75, I began to notice the first signs that my health was failing. Forgetfulness, difficulty speaking, sometimes confusion in my thoughts. I wrote it off as age until one morning I woke up with a numbness on the left side of my body. The stroke was not the most severe, but serious enough to scare me. For the first time in years, I felt vulnerable. The doctors talked about the recovery period, about possible recurring attacks, about the need for constant monitoring. Cordelia and Trent rushed to the hospital with concerned faces, but I saw them interject when they thought I wasn't looking. I saw in their eyes not concern for my health, but calculation. "Dad, Trent and I don't think you should live alone," Cordelia said, a week after I was released from the hospital. We were sitting in the living room of my house in suburban Charlotte, the spacious two-story building I'd bought 30 years ago, and where most of my life with Eleanor had been spent. "I'm doing fine," I replied, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. My left arm was still a mess, and I was often confused with my morning medication. "The doctors say you need constant care," Trent interjected with that particular tone of feigned concern that I'd always hated about him. "Cordelia and I can't be there around the clock. We have work, a house." I looked at my daughter, trying to see some genuine concern in her eyes. But Cordelia avoided my gaze, nervously adjusting her light brown hair, the same as her mother's. "We found a really nice place," she continued. "The Autumn Days Nursing Home. It has medical staff, organized recreational activities." "I'm not going to move into a nursing home," I said. "This house belonged to your mother and me. This is where I'm staying." Cordelia sighed with visible irritation. "Father, be reasonable. You can barely look after yourself. What if you have another stroke when you're alone?" I knew there was some truth in what she said. After the hospital, I did find it more difficult to cope with daily activities. But there was another truth. This house was my last refuge, the last place where I felt Eleanor's presence. "Give me time to think," I said at last. But I wasn't given time. 3 days later, Cordelia arrived with some paperwork and told me that they'd booked me a place at Autumn Days, and I needed to decide immediately. Trent stayed in the car. Apparently, he didn't want to be in the conversation. "We're selling the house," Cordelia explained, not looking me in the eye. "The money will be used to pay for your stay there and to keep your savings for future medical expenses. What's left will be inherited by you," I finished for her. "Father, don't start," she grumbled. "We're doing this for your own good." I realized I had lost this fight before it even began. My daughter had long ago learned how to manipulate me, using my guilt over her emotional detachment in her childhood. And now she had another trump card: my health. A week later, I was already being transported to Autumn Days, a one-story red brick building on the outskirts of Charlotte. At first glance, I realized that this place had been chosen not because of the quality of service, but because of the price. A dreary lobby with worn furniture, the smell of disinfectants mixed with the smell of old age, nurses who seemed exhausted before the day even started. My room turned out to be small, with one window overlooking the parking lot. A simple bed, nightstand, closet, and chair made up all the furniture. The walls were painted a pale green color that was supposed to be soothing, but in fact resembled a hospital room. "It's only temporary," Cordelia said as she helped the nurse bring in my things. "Once you're settled in, we'll think about something more appropriate." I nodded silently, knowing it was a lie. Autumn Days will be my last refuge if I don't find a way to change things. After Cordelia left, I sat in my new room, listening to the muffled sounds of the television from the common living room and the shuffling of feet in the hallway. I felt betrayed, but what pissed me off the most was that I had let this happen. I, a man who had spent a lifetime controlling every aspect of my existence, found myself helpless in the face of old age and family betrayal. The next day, Cordelia and Trent arrived to tell me that the house was all ready for sale. They talked about how quickly it would find a buyer, given the location and condition, about how they would keep some of the furniture and sell the rest. How things are working out so well. "We have to meet with the administrator to discuss the financials," Cordelia said, glancing at her watch. "Do you mind waiting here while we settle the details?" I nodded and they left, leaving me alone in the room. But instead of sitting and waiting, I decided to walk down the hall. My left leg was still weaker than my right, but I could already walk without much difficulty. I was slowly moving along the wall, leaning on it with my hand, when I heard familiar voices from behind the ajar door of the receptionist's office. "We'd like to discuss payment options," Trent was saying. "My father-in-law has considerable savings, but we'd prefer to go with the most economical package." "Of course," replied a female voice that I assumed belonged to the receptionist. "Autumn Days offers several levels of care. The basic package you have chosen includes lodging, 3 meals a day, and minimal medical care. Additional services such as physical therapy, specialized meals, or individualized recreational programs are charged separately." "The basic package is fine," Cordelia said quickly. "Father had always been a frugal man. He wouldn't approve of spending too much." I felt the blood rush to my face. Frugal? I've always provided my family with everything they needed and more. Cordelia had never known want. She had the best education I could pay for, and now she's using my supposed frugality as an excuse to put me in the cheapest facilities possible. "Are you sure?" the administrator asked. "Given Mr. Hollister's condition after his stroke, he could use regular physical therapy. We have excellent specialists." "We're sure," Trent replied firmly. "If the need arises, we can always add services later." I backed away from the door, feeling the anger growing inside me. They hadn't just put me in a nursing home, they'd chosen the cheapest option, despite my considerable savings that Trent had mentioned. And why? To keep as much money as possible for themselves when I was gone. Slowly, I walked back to my room, comprehending what I had heard. My brain, used to analyzing numbers and identifying patterns, began to work. I remembered the looks Cordelia and Trent had exchanged at the hospital. I remembered how quickly they decided to sell the house. I remembered Trent's comments about my savings. Cordelia and Trent weren't just putting me somewhere safe, they were getting rid of a burden and preparing to receive their inheritance at the same time. Perhaps they were even hoping that at Autumn Days, with minimal care, I wouldn't last too long. When they returned to the room, I pretended to doze off. I heard Cordelia say, "We'll stop by again in a couple days before we leave." "Departure?" I opened my eyes, feigning sleepiness. Yeah, Cordelia hesitated. We were going to tell you. We've had a vacation planned for a long time. 2 weeks in Europe. We thought about canceling because of your illness, but now that you're settled and safe. Of course, I said. Go. Enjoy yourself. I could see the relief on their faces. They had expected scandal, recriminations, maybe even tears. But I didn't give them that pleasure. Instead, I began to contemplate how to use their absence to my advantage. When they left, I sat at the window, looking out at the empty parking lot. A plan was forming in my head. I wasn't going to put up with being a helpless old man who had been turned in for recycling. I still had access to my bank accounts. I still had connections from my professional life. And I still had a sharp mind, despite the stroke that had occurred. I watched Cordelia and Trent get into their expensive new car, probably bought in anticipation of my inheritance, and drive away. I sat at the window of my room at autumn days, watching Cordelia and Trent transfer some packages into the trunk of their brand new SUV in the parking lot. Their vacation to Europe started tomorrow, a 2-week tour of France, Italy, and Spain. They stopped by my place before they left to say goodbye. I wanted to believe that they felt a modicum of shame leaving on a luxurious trip while I stayed in this dreary place, but their animated gestures and happy smiles said otherwise. "We'll be calling, Father," Cordelia said, peeking into my room. She was wearing an expensive pantsuit that had undoubtedly been bought especially for the trip. "You have the number of our hotel in Paris, and I left all the contacts at the front desk." "Don't worry about me," I replied with feigned cheerfulness. "Enjoy your vacation." "We'll bring you some souvenirs," Trent promised, standing at the door and glancing at his watch. It was obvious he was in a hurry to get away. "Take care of her," I told him. It was a phrase I'd said many times over the years of their marriage, but today there was a special irony in it. When they left, I felt relieved for the first time since moving into autumn days. Their presence had been weighing on me, reminding me of betrayal and helplessness. Now that they were out of sight, I could ponder my next steps without interference. The first days in the nursing home were a real challenge for me. The daily routine was monotonous to the point of nausea. Rise at 6 in the morning, breakfast at 7, medication at 8, group activities, for those who could participate, at 10, lunch at 12, quiet time, dinner at 6, and bedtime at 9. The food was bland and tasteless, the facilities sterile and impersonal, and the staff professionally indifferent. My dining room roommates were 3 older men about my age: the silent Henry, a former accountant with Parkinson's disease; Edward, a retired high school history teacher who constantly confused the present with the past; and Roger, once the owner of a small print shop but now just a grumpy old man with a grudge against everything. "You'll get used to it," Roger told me on the 3rd day, noticing my disgust at my picking at the tasteless mashed potatoes. "Or die." The latter was more likely. I wasn't going to get used to it or die. Despite the stroke, my brain was working clearly enough to realize that I needed to find a way out of this situation. Fortunately, Cordelia hadn't been able to gain complete control of my finances. She only had access to one of my accounts, the one that paid for my stay at autumn days. The rest of my accounts and investments remained under my control. On the 4th day of my stay at the nursing home, I noticed a man in the common living room who stood out sharply from the usual visitors. While most came in jeans or casual clothes, this one was dressed in an impeccable suit that even my fashion-unsophisticated eye identified as expensive. He was in his mid-40s, with an appearance that might have been considered unremarkable if it weren't for the intelligent, attentive eyes behind the stylish, thin-rimmed glasses. He wasn't visiting anyone in particular, but seemed to be looking around the institution. I noticed him politely but insistently questioning the receptionist about something, making notes in a small notebook. Then he was talking to one of the nurses, asking questions and listening carefully to the answers. At one point our eyes crossed, and he gave me a slight nod as if acknowledging my presence among the impersonal mass of the house's inhabitants. The next day I saw him again, this time in the cafeteria. Deciding I had nothing to lose, I made my way to the coffee table next to him. Leaning on the cane I'd been given for mobility, I pretended to try to handle the coffee machine. "The coffee here is terrible," I said, fiddling with the buttons deliberately. "I never thought I'd miss regular instant coffee, but this drink is making me reevaluate my priorities." The man smiled and his face instantly changed, becoming more open and friendly. "I absolutely agree," he replied. "I'd say it's not coffee, but brown water with a pretension. Let me help you." He deftly operated the machine and handed me a cup. "Peter Randall," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Ebenezer Hollister," I said, shaking his hand. "You don't look like you're related to anyone here." "And I'm not," Peter nodded. "I'm a lawyer specializing in family law and elder law. I'm doing some kind of audit of this place at the request of some families." "What were your impressions?" I asked with genuine interest. Peter looked around, made sure no one was listening, and lowered his voice. "Let's just say I wouldn't recommend this place to my clients. The basic care is there, but the quality leaves a lot to be desired. How long have you been here?" "A little over a week," I answered. "My daughter and son-in-law decided that after my stroke I needed ongoing care." "So they chose autumn days," Peter paused. "Not the most impressive choice, if I may say so." "They chose the cheapest option," I said bluntly, deciding not to beat around the bush. "Decided to sell my house and go to Europe to enjoy life while I lived out my days here on a basic package deal." Peter didn't seem shocked by my candor. Instead, he nodded understandingly. "Unfortunately, it's a typical story. I see it all too often in my practice." "You said you wouldn't recommend this place to your clients," I continued. "What would you recommend?" "It depends on the financial possibilities, of course," Peter replied. "But if we're talking about the best option in Charlotte, it's definitely Golden Harbor." "Golden Harbor?" I interjected. "I'd never heard of it." "It's a high-end nursing home on the north side of town," Peter explained. "It's a whole different level of care. Individual suites, 24-hour medical care, 5-star meals, spa, pool, cultural programs. It's more like a luxury hotel than a nursing home." "Sounds impressive," I said. "And it must be impressively expensive." "Yes, it's not cheap," Peter admitted. "But the quality of life is incomparably better. I've helped many clients move there, and not a single one has regretted the decision. Many say it's the best years of their lives." This information stuck with me. I was looking thoughtfully at my coffee cup when Peter spoke again. "Look, Mr. Hollister, I don't want to be intrusive, but if you need legal advice regarding your situation, I might be able to help." "Why?" I asked you bluntly. We had just met. Peter smiled. "Let's just say I have a soft spot for people who are underestimated by their own children. Besides, you seem to me to be a man who is not used to giving up without a fight." I looked at him carefully, trying to determine if he had ulterior motives, but his gaze was open and sincere. "Here's my business card," he said, pulling a small rectangle of heavy paper from his inside jacket pocket. "If you decide you need help, just give me a call." I took the card and put it in my shirt pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Rundell. I'll think about your offer." "Please call me Peter," he said, standing up. "I'd better be going." "It was nice to meet you, Mr. Hollister." "Ebenezer," I corrected him. "It was nice to meet you, too." After he left, I sat for a long time thinking about our conversation. Golden Harbor sounded like a place where a man could grow old with dignity, not just live out his days in a faceless room. Perhaps it was exactly the outlet I was looking for. That evening I pulled out my old laptop, which Cordelia had reluctantly left me, believing that at my age and condition I was unlikely to need it. Connecting to Autumn Day's weak Wi-Fi, I began to explore Golden Harbor. The website was impressive, professionally done with photos of the luxury suites, chef-driven restaurant, pool, spa area, and manicured gardens. Resident reviews were rave reviews. I also found an article in the local newspaper about how Golden Harbor is changing the perception of nursing homes, turning the last years of life into a golden autumn rather than a fading one. The cost was really high, much higher than what Cordelia and Trent were paying for autumn days. But I had savings and investments that I still had access to, and most importantly, I had a clear understanding of what I wanted to do. The next morning, I called Peter Rundle. "Mr. Rundle," I said when he answered, "this is Ebenezer Hollister from Autumn Days. We spoke yesterday." "Of course, Mr. Hollister." His voice sounded friendly. "What can I do for you?" "I want to visit Golden Harbor," I said bluntly. "And if it's as you describe, I want to move there as soon as possible." "I see," Peter answered without surprise, as if he'd been expecting this call. "I can arrange a visit today. I have a good relationship with the administration." "That's great," I said. "But there is one problem. I have to get out of here somehow." "Don't worry about that," Peter said confidently. "I'll pick you up at 2 o'clock. We'll tell the administration you're meeting with a lawyer on a personal matter. Technically, that would be true." At 2 o'clock, Peter did indeed show up at Autumn Days, dressed in the same immaculate suit as when we first met. He exchanged a few words with the receptionist, and soon we were on our way in his comfortable automobile toward North Charlotte. "Are you sure you want to do this right now?" Peter asked as we pulled onto the highway. "Usually, decisions like this take time to think about." "I'm 77 years old, Mr. Rundle," I answered. "I don't have time for long deliberation. If Golden Harbor is even half as good as what you've told me, I'll sign the papers today." Peter nodded understandingly. "By the way, we have an appointment with Agnes Woodward, the resident I told you about. She has kindly agreed to show you her apartment and answer your questions." 20 minutes later, we arrived at the Golden Harbor. The building itself was impressive. Modern architecture, plenty of glass and light, surrounded by a well-kept park with flower beds and neat paths. Nothing about the place reminded us of a stereotypical nursing home. Inside, we were greeted by a spacious hall with marble floor, comfortable sofas, and live plants. There were paintings hanging on the walls that looked like originals, not cheap reproductions. The staff was dressed in elegant uniforms and held themselves with a professional benevolence, a far cry from the indifference of the Autumn Days staff. We were ushered into the office of the director, Richard Brighton, a trim, middle-aged man with energetic manners and a shrewd eye. "Mr. Hollister, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking my hand. "Peter told me about your situation. Golden Harbor was designed for people like you, active, independent, wanting to maintain control of your life but needing some support." After a brief conversation in the office, Mr. Brighton offered a tour of the grounds. We visited the restaurant where the tables were covered with tablecloths and set with china and crystal, the spa with a swimming pool and jacuzzi, the library with an impressive collection of books, the cinema room, the room for games and creativity. "Now let's have a look at the apartments," the director suggested. "We have several options, from studios to two-bedroom suites." We looked at 3 types of apartments, and they were all spacious, bright, with modern furniture and appliances. They were real homes, not hospital rooms. Finally, we met Agnes Woodward, an elegant woman of about 75 with short-cropped gray hair and lively blue eyes. She invited us into her apartment, a cozy living room with a separate bedroom and a small kitchen. "Welcome to my humble abode," she smiled, gesturing for us to sit down. "Tea? Coffee?" "Thank you. I'd love some coffee," I replied, looking around. Agnes's apartment was personalized. There were pictures on the walls, books on the shelves, and unfinished embroidery on the table. "How long have you lived here?" I asked when she brought coffee. 5 years, Agnes answered. "The best 5 years of my life since I retired. You know, when I was widowed, my children insisted that I move in with them or to a regular nursing home. But I discovered this place and have never once regretted my decision. We talked to Agnes for about an hour. She told me about the daily life in Golden Harbor, about the other residents, about how the medical care was organized. The more I listened, the stronger my resolve became. "But you realize it's expensive," Agnes warned towards the end of the conversation. "Many people have to sell their houses to afford this kind of life." "I have savings," I replied. "And to be honest, I like the idea of spending that money on myself instead of leaving it to my daughter, who put me in a cheap nursing home." Agnes nodded understandingly. "You know, Ebenezer, sometimes the best lesson we can teach our children is to show them that our lives belong to us, not to them." After saying goodbye to Agnes, we returned to the principal's office to discuss financial details. Mr. Brighton showed me several payment options, including the possibility of a long-term fixed-rate contract. "We have a vacant apartment right now," he said. "If you are interested, we can start the paperwork." "I am interested," I said firmly. "I want to move in as soon as possible." "There is one detail," Peter intervened. "Mr. Hollister has partial custody of his daughter after her stroke, but I've reviewed the paperwork and there's a legal loophole. The guardianship only covers certain aspects of her health, but it doesn't cover major financial decisions." "We can work within those restrictions," Mr. Brighton said confidently. "Our lawyers will help formalize everything correctly." Within the next 2 hours, I had signed the preliminary papers, made the deposit, and set a date for the move 3 days later, just in time for Cordelia and Trent to be in the middle of their European tour. As Peter and I drove back to Autumn Days, I felt like a different person. Hope and anticipation had supplanted apathy and despair. "What do you think your daughter will say when she returns and discovers you've moved?" Peter asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I'm sure it will be an interesting conversation." That night I couldn't sleep for a long time, but not because of anxiety or pain as usual, but because of excitement and anticipation. For the first time since my stroke, I felt like I was back in control of my life, and that feeling was priceless. The morning of my visit to Golden Harbor was remarkably clear. The sun was shining outside the window, as if approving my decision. I dressed carefully, choosing my best suit, which Cordelia had left me, thinking I wouldn't need it in the nursing home. By 10 o'clock, I was fully prepared and waiting in the lobby of Autumn Days. At exactly 10 hours and 30 minutes, a black sedan pulled up outside the entrance. Peter Rundle stepped out, as trim and elegant as when we first met. "Ready for a big change, Ebenezer?" he asked, shaking my hand. "More than ready," I replied, feeling an unusual burst of energy. The administrator of Autumn Days, a middle-aged woman with a perpetually tired face, gave us a look. "Mr. Hollister is going to consult a lawyer," Peter explained with a professional smile. "We'll be back this evening." She nodded without much interest. Autumn Days cared little where their wards went as long as they had someone to look after them. The drive to Golden Harbor took about half an hour. Along the way, Peter gave me details about the institution that would soon become my new home. "Dr. James Harrington founded it 15 years ago," Peter said, maneuvering nimbly through the morning traffic. He was a geriatrician and had seen how horribly the elderly were treated in ordinary nursing homes. Golden Harbor was his answer to this problem, a place where old age can be a new beginning, not an end. When we arrived, I was amazed. The pictures on the website didn't convey the full grandeur of the place. Golden Harbor was located on the grounds of a former country club, surrounded by old oak trees and manicured gardens. The main building was an elegant 3-story colonial-style structure, and surrounding it were several cottages connected by covered galleries. We were greeted in the lobby by an elegant woman who introduced herself as Veronica Clark, the Director of Client Relations. "Mr. Hollister, we're so glad to see you," she said with genuine warmth in her voice. "Peter has told us a lot about you. Welcome to Golden Harbor." The next 2 hours passed like a dream. Veronica took us all over the complex, showing us everything that might interest a potential resident. I saw a spacious library with thousands of books and comfortable chairs for reading, an art studio where seniors practiced painting and sculpture, a music room with a grand piano and other instruments. But it was the living quarters that really impressed me. Veronica showed me several options of apartments, from cozy studios to spacious two-room suites. All of them were decorated with impeccable taste, equipped with modern technology and security systems. These aren't just rooms, Veronica explained. It's your home. You can furnish it with your own furniture, hang your own pictures, even repaint the walls if you want. Our goal is to make you feel at home here. After touring the living quarters, we headed to the Golden Harbor restaurant. Unlike the Autumn Days dining room with its plastic tables and bland food, this was a true haute cuisine restaurant. The tables were covered with snow-white tablecloths, served with china and crystal. The chef personally came up to us to introduce himself and tell us about the menu. "We have 4 meals a day," he explained with a noticeable French accent. "Breakfast, lunch, afternoon snack and dinner. All meals are prepared with fresh produce, taking into account the dietary requirements of each resident. If you have special preferences or restrictions, we will always find a solution." We dined in the restaurant and the food was delicious, on par with the finest establishments where Eleanor and I celebrated our wedding anniversaries. After lunch, Veronica showed us the Golden Harbor Medical Center, a modern clinic with the latest equipment and a staff of doctors of various specialties. A general practitioner, neurologist, and cardiologist are on duty here all the time, she explained. If necessary, we can provide round-the-clock individualized care. But our philosophy is not to impose help, but to provide it when it is really needed. We respect the independence of our residents. The final part of the tour was the Wellness Center, with a swimming pool, jacuzzi, sauna, and gym specially equipped for seniors. "Physical activity is the key to longevity," said Veronica. "Our trainers develop individual programs for each resident, taking into account their abilities and limitations." By the end of the tour, I had no doubts. Golden Harbor was exactly where I wanted to spend the rest of my days. Here, they respected the dignity of the elderly. Here they created conditions not for living, but for a full life. Waiting for us in Veronica's office was Richard Brighton, the executive director of Golden Harbor, an energetic man in his 50s with a penetrating gaze and a firm handshake. "Mr. Hollister," he said as we sat down at the conference table, "Peter has told me about your situation. I want you to know that we accept residents not only on the basis of their financial ability, but also by assessing whether they are a good fit for our community. And I can see that you're a perfect fit for Golden Harbor." "Thank you for the compliment," I replied. "But let's talk business. How much does it cost to live here?" Richard said an amount that was several times what Cordelia and Trent were paying for Autumn Days, but I was prepared for that. "There are several payment options," he continued. "Monthly installments, an annual fixed-rate contract, or a special offer for those planning a long-term stay. You can transfer ownership of your home and a portion of your savings to us in exchange for living here for life. This will guarantee you a place in Golden Harbor for the rest of your life, regardless of changes in your financial situation." I glanced over to Peter. We had discussed this possibility earlier and I had already made up my mind. "It's exactly what I need," I said. "My house is empty now and I don't want my daughter and son-in-law to have the money from the sale. I'd rather use it to make sure I have a decent old age." "A wise decision," Richard nodded. "But there are legal considerations. Peter has already explained to me that your daughter has certain custodial rights after your stroke." "Limited rights," Peter clarified. "They only apply to certain aspects of healthcare, but they don't affect financial decisions. Besides, Mr. Hollister underwent an independent medical examination that confirmed his full capacity." He took a folder of documents out of his briefcase and handed it to Richard. "Everything is in order. the director said, looking over the papers. "We can finalize the deal today if you're ready." "I'm more than ready," I said. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of the contract. Peter scrutinized every clause, explaining the legal details to me. Finally, when everything was agreed upon, I signed several copies of the document. "Congratulations, Mr. Hollister," Richard smiled, shaking my hand. "You are now officially a resident of Golden Harbor. When would you like to move in?" "As soon as possible," I answered. "Preferably tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Veronica was surprised. "Usually our residents need more time to pack and say goodbye." "I have no one to say goodbye to at Autumn Days," I said firmly. "And I don't have a lot of stuff. I think one suitcase will be enough." "In that case, we'll be glad to see you tomorrow," Richard nodded. "Veronica will have your apartment ready by 12 o'clock. As Peter and I drove back to Autumn Days, I felt an unusual excitement. For the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the future with hope rather than despair. "You know, Ebenezer," Peter said as we drove up to Autumn Days, "I think I should give your daughter some notice of the move. Not that you have to report to her, but still—" "I have a better idea," I replied with a smile. "I'll send her a message that will definitely get her attention." Back in my room, I pulled out the cell phone Cordelia had insisted I keep with me at all times, in case of emergency. She'd only called me once in the 10 days since they'd left, a brief, formal conversation in which she'd talked more about her impressions of Paris than inquiring about my well-being. I opened the messaging app and typed, "I've rewritten my inheritance." After sending that terse message, I turned off my phone and put it in my nightstand drawer. Let it suffer the unknown until tomorrow. I'd be at Golden Harbor by then. The next morning was spent in hurried packing. I really didn't have much stuff: clothes, a few books, photo albums, and personal documents. It all easily fit into one large suitcase. At 11 o'clock, Peter arrived to help me with the move. The administration of Autumn Days was surprised by my sudden decision, but did not put obstacles in my way. After all, I was a fully capable adult with the right to choose where I lived. "Are you sure your daughter will approve of this decision?" the receptionist asked as I signed the discharge papers. "Not only will she not approve, but she'll be furious," I answered honestly. And that was probably the best part of the whole plan. By noon, I was already at Golden Harbor, settling into my new apartment, a spacious studio with a separate bedroom, a fully equipped kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the garden. Veronica personally made sure I had everything I needed and introduced me to a few of the other residents. "We're having a musical evening tonight in the common living room," she said before leaving. "Come if you'd like to come. It's a great opportunity to get to know the other residents." Left alone, I turned on my cell phone. The screen showed 27 missed calls from Cordelia and dozens of messages ranging from, "What do you mean?" to, "Dad, if you don't answer right away, I'm calling the police." I grinned and typed back, "It's okay. I'll explain when I see you." A few seconds later, the phone rang. "Yes, Cordelia?" I answered it with feigned calm. "Daddy," she sounded panicked. "What's going on? What do you mean you signed over the inheritance? Who did you sign it over to?" "I'd rather discuss it in person," I answered. "When are you coming back from Europe?" "We're already at the airport waiting for the flight," she said. "Trent was able to change the tickets. We'll be in Charlotte tomorrow morning." "Great," I said. "Then I'll see you tomorrow." "Daddy, tell me now," she started to say, but I cut the conversation short. Peter, who was still with me, shook his head with a smile. "You are a cruel man, Ebenezer." "No," I objected. "It would be cruel to turn my own father into a cheap nursing home and go off to enjoy life. I'm just giving them a lesson." Cordelia and Trent returned to Charlotte after a 14-hour layover flight. Both of them bore the stamp of fatigue: wrinkled clothes, red eyes, and nervous, abrupt movements. Their luxurious European vacation had ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving behind only the bitterness of unrealized plans and a sense of anxiety. The cab took them straight to the Autumn Days nursing home. They hadn't even stopped by the home to drop off their luggage. 2 large suitcases now stood beside them at the reception desk. "We want to see my father, Ebenezer Hollister," Cordelia said, tapping her fingers impatiently on the surface of the counter. "Room 204. The receptionist, a full, middle-aged woman with a tired face, slowly took her eyes off the computer and looked at the visitors with mild surprise. "Mr. Hollister?" she asked, as if checking to see if she'd misheard. "But he checked out yesterday." "What do you mean? Checked out?" Cordelia raised her voice, drawing the attention of several visitors in the lobby. "Where could he have checked out to? He had a stroke. He can't take care of himself." The receptionist maintained a professional calm, clearly accustomed to the emotional outbursts of relatives. "Mr. Hollister has been declared fully competent," she explained, fumbling through some papers. "We have the results of the independent medical examination and all the necessary documents. He was discharged of his own accord, accompanied by his lawyer." "Lawyer?" Trent intervened, stepping forward. "What lawyer? My father-in-law doesn't have a lawyer." The receptionist shrugged. "Mr. Peter Rundle. He visited Mr. Hollister several times last week, and yesterday he helped him with the move." Cordelia clutched her head. "My God, Trent, what's going on? Who is this Rundle? And where did my father go?" "I don't know," Trent answered grimly. "But I think it has something to do with his message about the inheritance." He turned to the receptionist. "Did he leave any address, contacts, anything at all?" The woman shook her head. "No, he just signed all the necessary documents and left. We have no right to demand information about our client's future residence if they don't want it." "But we're his family." Cordelia was indignant. "I'm his daughter." "Who hasn't visited him in 10 days, the receptionist said nonchalantly, causing Cordelia's anger to rise. "How dare you? We were on vacation. We deserved a vacation after all those months of caring for him. And now he's just disappeared and you haven't even called us." "We did call," the woman replied calmly. "Twice. Both times it went to voicemail. We left messages." Trent pulled out his phone and checked the missed calls. Indeed, 2 calls from Autumn Days. "Cordelia, did you check your voicemail?" "No," she snapped. "We were in Paris, in case you've forgotten. I didn't want to think about anything but vacation." Trent took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Okay, let's think logically. Your father is in town somewhere with some lawyer. He sent you a message about the inheritance. Maybe he changed his will. Or worse," Cordelia paled. "What if the lawyer was a crook? What if he cheated Daddy and took over his estate?" "It's possible," Trent agreed. "We should call the police." They headed for the exit, but the receptionist called out to them. "Mr. Hollister left something for you. Just a minute." She pulled a small envelope from the desk drawer and handed it to Cordelia. "He asked me to give this to you when you showed up." Cordelia tore open the envelope impatiently. Inside was a short note written in her father's familiar handwriting. "I'm at Golden Harbor. Come by if you want details." "Golden Harbor?" Cordelia asked, showing the note to Trent. "What kind of place is that?" The receptionist, hearing the name, involuntarily whistled. "Oh, it's an upscale nursing home on the north side of town. Very expensive place. Many of our clients dream of going there, but few can afford it." "A luxury nursing home?" Cordelia and Trent looked at each other in bewilderment. "But how? How could he get there?" "I have no idea," the administrator shrugged. "But if he's there, he must have found a way to pay for his stay." 20 minutes later, the cab dropped them off in front of the gates of the Golden Harbor. Even from the outside, the place looked impressive. Manicured grounds with century-old oaks, an elegant colonial-style main building, guards at the entrance. "We're here to see Ebenezer Hollister," Cordelia said to the guard. "We're his daughter and son-in-law." The guard checked the list of visitors. "Yes, Mr. Hollister warned of your visit. Please come in." Administration is in the main building. They'll tell you where to find Mr. Hollister." As they walked along the stone-paved path to the main building, Trent couldn't hide his surprise. "This place looks more like a five-star hotel than a nursing home. How the hell did your father get in here?" "I don't know," Cordelia answered grimly. "But I suspect it has something to do with the rewritten inheritance." They were met in the spacious lobby by an elegant woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Veronica Clark, the director of customer service. "Mr. Hollister is waiting for you in his suite," she said with a professional smile. "Let me show you out." "The apartment," Cordelia interjected, not hiding her sarcasm. "At Autumn Days he had a room with a bed and a nightstand." "At Golden Harbor, we provide our residents with full housing," Veronica replied, not reacting to Cordelia's tone. "Mr. Hollister has a studio apartment with a separate bedroom, a fully equipped kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the garden." As they walked down the hallway, Cordelia and Trent gazed in amazement at the interior. Expensive framed paintings on the walls, soft carpets, elegant furniture. They passed by the library, the music room, the art studio. It all looked like a luxurious country club, not a nursing home. "How much does it cost to live in a place like this?" Trent couldn't stand it. Veronica smiled. "Our rates vary depending on the type of suite and the services we offer. But Mr. Hollister chose a special option. He gave us the title to his house and some of his savings in exchange for living here for life." Cordelia stopped short. "What? He gave you his house?" "And a significant portion of his savings," Veronica confirmed. "It's standard practice for many of our long-term residents. It guarantees them a place at Golden Harbor for the rest of their lives, regardless of changes in their financial situation." Trent turned pale and grabbed Cordelia's arm. That's what he meant by wrote the inheritance. They stopped in front of a door with the number 112. "Mr. Hollister is inside," Veronica said. "If you need anything, there's an internal phone on the table. All you have to do is dial 0, and the receptionist will answer at any time of the day or night." With those words, she left them alone with the door. Cordelia took a deep breath and knocked. "I was sitting in a comfortable chair by the window reading the newspaper when I heard a knock on the door. They had finally gotten there. I knew my message about the inheritance would make them rush in from Europe, dropping all their travel plans. "Come in," I said, folding the newspaper and setting it aside on the table next to me. The door opened, and I saw Cordelia and Trent frozen on the threshold. They looked exhausted, the wrinkled clothes, the circles under their eyes, the nervous movements. They were clearly in a hurry, having not even stopped home from their flight. That was the reaction I'd expected. "Ah, there you are," I said, pretending to be surprised to see them. "I'm glad you were able to return from Europe so quickly. How was your vacation?" I deliberately began with this innocent question, though I knew perfectly well that their rest was hopelessly spoiled by my message. But I wanted to be polite. After all, I didn't hate them, only disappointment. "Daddy, what's going on?" Cordelia exclaimed, taking a step forward. "What have you done? Did you really give the house and all your savings to this place?" Her tone was accusatory, as if I'd committed some kind of crime. It hurt me, but I kept my cool. "Not all of it," I corrected her. "Just some of it, enough to ensure that I could live comfortably here for the rest of my life." I watched Cordelia look around my apartment, a spacious, bright studio with large windows and a separate bedroom. Everything here was strikingly different from the dreary room at Autumn Days. The furniture was new and elegant. There were paintings on the walls and a small bookcase in the corner, already half filled with books. But why?" Cordelia splashed her hands. "We had agreed that Autumn Days was a good place. There was medical staff there, care." "Autumn Days is a warehouse for old people," I interrupted her, my voice hard for the first time. "Minimum care for minimum money. You chose the cheapest care package even though you knew about my savings. I remembered the conversation I overheard at Autumn Days when they were discussing the savings package with the receptionist. That was the moment I realized that it was more important to them to keep my money for themselves than to ensure I had a decent old age. "We just wanted to save your money," Cordelia objected. "We were thinking about your future." "No," I shook my head. "You were thinking about my inheritance, about what would be left to you when I died, and you figured that the less you spent on me now, the more you'd get later." I could see that my words had hurt her. She even recoiled slightly, as if she'd been slapped. But I felt no satisfaction at that, only sadness that our relationship had come to this point. Trent, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. "Ebenezer, you are unfair. We've taken care of you as best we could, but we have our own lives, our own plans, and now you can pursue them without regard for me or my money." I nodded. "Isn't that true freedom?" There was no sarcasm in those words. I really thought I was freeing them from having to take care of me for the sake of the inheritance. Let them live their own lives without relying on my money. "But the inheritance," Cordelia began, and then faltered, realizing that she was revealing her true motives. "Exactly," I smiled. "I signed over the inheritance to, and I did, to Golden Harbor. The house where your mother and I lived for 30 years is now owned by that institution, as does a significant portion of my savings. In exchange, I received a lifetime residence here, in conditions that, as you can see, are far superior to Autumn Days." Cordelia sank down on the couch, stunned by the reality of what was happening. "But how did you organize all this? I mean, you were post-stroke, I was capable enough to realize that I'd been written off," I replied calmly, "and sane enough to find a way out of it. With Peter's help, of course." "Who's Peter?" Trent asked. "Where did he come from?" "Peter Rundell is a respected lawyer specializing in elder law," I explained. "We met at Autumn Days, and he helped me see the alternatives. I didn't give them the details of how we met. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that Peter had helped me break out of the trap my own children had put me in." "Alternatives?" Cordelia interjected. "The alternative would have been to call us and discuss it." "When?" I grinned. "During your romantic dinner in Paris. Or perhaps during your tour of the Louvre. You've called me once in 10 days, Cordelia. 1. And you talked mostly about your impressions, not how I was doing." I saw her blush with embarrassment. She knew I was right. That one phone call had been more of a formality than a show of concern. "We thought you were well, that you were being taken care of." She tried to justify herself. "And we thought right." I nodded. "Not at Autumn Days, but here. Now I'm really taken care of, and I can enjoy my life without feeling like a burden to my family." At that moment, I really didn't feel like a burden, for the first time in a long time. Here at Golden Harbor, I was not the old man from room 204, but a respectable Mr. Hollister with his own apartment. "But that's not fair," exclaimed Trent, losing his temper. "We have cared for you for so many years, put up with your difficult character, and now we are left with nothing." I looked at him with slight surprise. Here it was, at last an honest admission that they were only interested in the inheritance. "Put up with my temper?" "Trent, we saw each other on big holidays and family gatherings, a couple times a year, tops. What tolerance do you mean?" "You've always been demanding," he continued uncertainly, "and we expected that after all." "You were counting on an inheritance," I finished for him. "That's normal. Many children count on inheritance from their parents, but no one guaranteed you'd get it. I earned that money, I built this house, and I have every right to use it as I see fit." I didn't feel any schadenfreude in saying that, just the strange calm of a man who had finally taken control of his life. Cordelia, realizing that the emotional arguments weren't working, decided to change tactics. "Dad, are you sure this deal is legitimate? You've had a stroke. Your capacity could have been limited." I underwent an independent medical examination, I replied calmly. The results showed that I am fully capable of making financial decisions. Besides, the guardianship you received only dealt with certain aspects of healthcare, but did not address financial matters. Peter checked everything out. The deal is completely legal. We can challenge it in court, Trent said threateningly. You can try, I shrugged. But I have to warn you, the paperwork is impeccable. Besides, the court will take into account not only the legal aspects, but also the quality of my life. And it's much higher here in Golden Harbor than in Autumn Days. Do you really want to stand trial as people who are trying to return an elderly father from the comforts of home to a cheaper and less comfortable facility just to preserve their inheritance? I saw them interject, realizing the futility of this path. Even if they had legal grounds, which was doubtful, the moral side of the issue was clearly not in their favor. But what do we do now? Cordelia asked, almost pitifully. We were counting on that money. We had plans. You can go on with your life, I said softly. Work, save, plan for the future, like millions of people do who don't count on their parents' inheritance. There was no gloating or revenge in my voice, just the calm confidence of a man who had made a decision and wasn't going to change it. You could have at least consulted us, Cordelia said after a pause. We're your family. Family is as much about rights as it is about responsibilities, I replied. When you sent me to Autumn Days and left for Europe, you didn't consult me. You did what you thought was right. Now I have done the same. There was a heavy silence in the room. I could see Cordelia looking at me, trying to find that helpless old man they had left behind at Autumn Days 2 weeks ago. But I wasn't him anymore. Here at Golden Harbor, I was myself again, a confident, independent man in control of my life. Well, she said at last, it looks like you've made up your mind. All we have to do is accept it. That's right, I nodded. And no matter what, I'll be glad to have you here. When you want to visit me, just call ahead. Golden Harbor has a great restaurant. We could have lunch together. I really meant it. Despite everything that had happened, Cordelia was still my daughter, and I didn't want to completely sever our relationship. It was just that they would now be built on new terms, with no expectations or obligations on either side. We'll think about it, she said, rising. We have to go now. We have luggage in the cab and... Of course, I nodded. I won't keep you. I walked them to the door and shook Trent's hand. Take care of my daughter. Cordelia hugged me awkwardly, stiffly, as if she were hugging a stranger. I felt a pang of regret. We had once been close, but years of mutual misunderstanding and disappointment had created a chasm between us. Dad, It's okay, Cordelia, I said softly. It's exactly as it should be. When the door closed behind them, I returned to my chair by the window. Behind the glass, I could see the well-tended garden of Golden Harbor, where a few elderly people were talking peacefully on benches. I thought I'd get to know them soon. Maybe I'd find new friends, new interests. Of course, it was a little sad how things had turned out with Cordelia. But I didn't regret my decision. For the first time in a long time, I felt free and at peace. I knew I had made the right choice. It had been a week since Cordelia and Trent had heard about my move to Golden Harbor. I expected them to show up again. The blow to their plans for my inheritance was too big a blow to just accept. And indeed, early Saturday morning, I received a call from the front desk informing me that my daughter and her husband were requesting a meeting. Let them come up, I said, putting aside the book I was reading. I had settled into my new apartment for the week. Veronica helped me order more bookshelves and a table lamp. I got to know a few of my neighbors, mostly older people who had decided to spend the rest of their lives in comfort rather than as a burden on their children. We especially bonded with Donald Prescott, a former history professor who turned out to be an excellent chess partner. A knock on the door interrupted my musings. I rose from my chair, trying to move confidently, with no signs of weakness. I didn't want Cordelia to see me as a feeble old man to be manipulated. "Come in," I said, opening the door. Cordelia and Trent looked much better than when we'd last seen them, rested in expensive clothes with confident smiles, clearly prepared for a serious conversation. "Dad," Cordelia stepped forward and hugged me awkwardly. "How are you?" "You look good." "Thank you," I replied, gesturing for them to come in and sit down. "Golden Harbor has excellent food and medical care. I feel better than I have in years." "We're glad to hear that," Trent said, settling into the chair across from me. We'd been thinking a lot about our last conversation and decided we needed to talk things over quietly. I chuckled inwardly. Calmly discuss usually meant they'd come up with a new strategy for getting what they wanted. "Sure," I nodded. "I'm all ears." Cordelia took a deep breath as if gathering her thoughts. "Dad, we understand that you were upset with the way we acted. Maybe Autumn Days really wasn't the best place for you. But what you did, giving the house and most of your savings to that place it's too radical." "What do you mean, radical?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "It's wasteful." Trent couldn't take it anymore. "You gave away a fortune for something you could have gotten much cheaper." "Cheaper?" I questioned. "Like Autumn Days? With their bland food, indifferent staff, and rooms that look like hospital rooms." "There are intermediate options," Cordelia interjected. "We could find something better than Autumn Days, but not as expensive as Golden Harbor." "Why?" I asked simply. "I have the money to afford the best. Why should I settle for something average?" "Because that money—" Trent started and then he stopped, realizing he'd said too much. "This money is what?" I picked up on it. "Was it supposed to go to you when I died? Is that how you looked at it? Not as my money, but as your future inheritance?" Cordelia blushed, but quickly pulled herself together. "It's not that, Dad. It's just that you've always been a practical man. You've always taught me to value money, not to waste it. And now you're going against your own principles." "I'm not wasting it," I said calmly. "I'm investing it in the quality of my life. A decent old age. Does that go against my principles?" Trent decided to change tactics. "Ebenezer, we're just worried about you. What if something happens to this Golden Harbor? What if they go bankrupt or don't fulfill their obligations? You'll be without a home and a significant portion of your savings." "Peter checked it out," I replied. "Golden Harbor has been around for 15 years. They have an impeccable reputation and a stable financial position. Besides, the contract is written in such a way that, in case of any problems with the institution, I will receive compensation sufficient to live comfortably anywhere else." "That, Peter," Cordelia began suspiciously. "Are you sure he was really protecting your interests? Maybe he got a commission from Golden Harbor for bringing in such a lucrative client." I smiled. "Maybe. But that doesn't change the fact that the deal was good for me. I got what I wanted, a decent place to live and confidence in the future." "But you didn't even consult us!" Cordelia exclaimed. "We are your family. We should have been involved in such an important decision." That's when I felt my calmness begin to leave me. I slowly got up from the chair and looked at my daughter. "Did you consult me when you decided to put me in Autumn Days? When you were choosing the cheapest care package? When you sold my house, the house where you grew up, where your mother and I lived for 30 years? That's different." Cordelia tried to object. "No," I said firmly. "It's the same. You made the decision for me because you thought you knew what was best. Now I've made the decision for me because I know what's best for me." Cordelia and Trent looked at each other, clearly not expecting such a rebuff. "Dad, listen." Cordelia tried to take my hand, but I gently pulled away. "We really meant well. Maybe we made a mistake with Autumn Days, but our intentions were good." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then why did I hear you tell Trent that the less spent on Dad now, the more we'll have left later?" Cordelia turned pale. Were you eavesdropping?" "No," I shook my head. It's just that you were talking loud enough in the hallway of autumn days without realizing that I could hear you. Like your conversation with the receptionist about the basic package deal and how I was a frugal person who wouldn't approve of spending too much. Trent looked embarrassed but quickly pulled himself together. Ebenezer, that may not have sounded like what we meant. We were really thinking of your welfare. And our own too, I added without anger, just stating the fact. What's wrong with that? Everyone has their own interests in mind. I don't blame you for that. I just want you to recognize that your concern is not for my welfare, but for the fact that you've lost the inheritance you were counting on. There was a heavy silence in the room. Cordelia and Trent sat there, eyes downcast, hesitant to confirm or deny my words. You know, I continued more gently, I'm not angry with you. I really am. I realize that you too have dreamed of a better life, of the opportunities my money would give you. But I'm not dead yet. And as long as I'm alive, I have the right to use my money as I see fit. But what are we to do now? Cordelia asked, and there was genuine despair in her voice. We had plans. We wanted to start our own business, buy a bigger house. You can do what millions of other people do, I answered. Work, save, take out loans. Go your own way, not wait for your old man father to die so you can get his inheritance. Trent jumped up, his face red with anger. You make it sound like we wanted you dead. That's not fair. I didn't say you wanted me dead, I said calmly. But you certainly made plans for the money you would get after it. Didn't you? Trent wanted to say something, but Cordelia put her hand on his shoulder, urging him to calm down. Enough, Trent. Dad's right. We did count on his inheritance, though we never wished him harm. That admission, albeit forced, touched me. At least Cordelia had the strength to admit the truth. I know you didn't mean me any harm. I nodded. Didn't care for me very much. And that's okay. You have your own life, your own problems. I don't want you to love me or care about me. I just want you to respect my right to control my life and my money. Cordelia looked upset, but at the same time there was something new in her eyes. Maybe understanding or even respect. You're right, Daddy, she said finally. We have no right to tell you how to live your life or how to spend your money. It's been a blow to us, but we'll get through it. I know you will, I smiled. You're young. You're healthy. You have good jobs. Maybe the loss of the inheritance will even be good for you, to make you rely on your own strength instead of other people's money. Trent grinned, clearly not sharing my optimism, but he didn't say anything. Well, Cordelia said, rising, I think we should go. We'll come visit you, if you don't mind. Of course I don't mind, I nodded. You can always come. Just call ahead. I walked them to the door. As they were about to leave, Cordelia turned around and hugged me tightly. We're sorry, Dad. We really weren't very good children. That confession caught me off guard. I stroked her back awkwardly. It's okay, Cordelia. You did what you thought was right. So did I. After they left, I returned to the chair by the window and sat for a while, looking out at the manicured garden of Golden Harbor. The conversation with my daughter and son-in-law had left a strange feeling, a mixture of sadness, relief, and satisfaction. I felt no gloating at having ruined their plans for my inheritance. But I was glad that I was finally able to stand up for myself, to make choices that were in my best interest and not the expectations of others. The ringing of the internal phone interrupted my musings. Mr. Hollister? It was Veronica's voice. We're having a literary evening in the common parlor tonight. Mr. Prescott will be reading his poetry. Will you join us? I'd love to, I answered. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I got up, went to the closet, and picked out a fresh shirt. At Golden Harbor, I tried to look neat, not for the sake of others, but for myself. Here I was, not the old man in room number 204, but the distinguished Meister Hollister. As I left the apartment, I met in the hallway Mrs. Edwards, an elegant widow whom I had met at a musical evening a few days before. Good evening, Ebenezer, she smiled. Are you going to hear Donald's poems, too? Yes, I nodded, offering her my hand. Let me escort you. We walked leisurely toward the common parlor, talking about books and music. Mrs. Edwards was an intelligent and educated woman who was a pleasure to talk to. The common living room was already filled with residents of Golden Harbor. Some sat in armchairs, others stood in small groups, talking softly. Donald Prescott, a tall, gray-haired man with the appearance of a professor, was preparing to read his poetry. I found a vacant seat next to Arthur Bishop, a former judge with whom we had recently begun playing chess. "Ah, Ebenezer," he rejoiced. "I was just about to invite you to a game after this evening. If you are not busy, of course." "I'd love to," I replied. "I need a rematch after my last defeat." Arthur grinned. "You can try, but I'm in good shape today." Our conversation was interrupted when Donald began his speech. His poems were simple but profound, about life, about old age, about memories and hopes. I listened, feeling a strange calm and contentment. Looking at the faces around me, I realized that I had found my place. Here, among people of my age and status, I felt understood and respected. Here no one looked at me as a burden or a source of inheritance. Here I was simply Ebenezer Hollister, a man with his own history, interests, and dignity. After the evening, Arthur and I actually played a game of chess. This time I won, although the game was tense until the last move. "Great game, Ebenezer," said Arthur, shaking my hand. "A rematch tomorrow?" "I will," I said, smiling. As I walked back to my apartment, I thought about how strange life was sometimes. Who would have thought that a stroke and my daughter's betrayal would lead me to the best period of my life? That at 77 I would find new friends, new interests, and new freedom? After all, maybe Cordelia and Trent did me a favor by putting me in autumn days. If it hadn't been for that, I might never have met Peter, never have heard of Golden Harbor, and would have continued to live in my old house, alone and forgotten. Now, however, new opportunities were opening up before me. Donald invited me to join their literary circle. Mrs. Edwards invited me to a classical concert the following Friday. And Arthur hinted that there was going to be a chess tournament at Golden Harbor and I should attend. Life went on, maybe not as I had planned, but perhaps even better. And that was the main thing.